Hi, this is Kush.
Hi, Kristash.
Hi, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Good, doing well.
Yeah.
You guys are still on campus or back to your hostels?
No, all of us are mostly all of us are back to our houses.
Okay,
You are left in hostels.
okay, good.
Yeah.
So
So
everyone's from the E cell, I believe, yeah?
yes, different years,
Okay,
but working in ISA.
got it.
Yeah. And so two more people are supposed to join. I think they'll just be here. They had some net connectivity, which is why they went. But anyways, I think we'll start.
Sure. No issue.
Right. So thank you. Firstly, thank you for giving us the opportunity of interviewing you. As I told you, this is mainly for the young entrepreneurs to learn from your entrepreneurial insights because it is always easier to relate to a senior who's gone through the same journey and then get takeaways from it. So it's mainly targeted to that audience,
Okay.
right? So I'm Yashi Agrawal. I'm in my third year, production industrial. Currently the head of PR and marketing at ISA.
Okay.
Uh,
Uh,
Hi Kush, I am Harsh, a third year undergraduate at IIT Roorkee, production and industrial, and I am the head of finance and operations in ECL at Roorkee.
okay, nice to meet you.
Hi, sir. I'm Daksh Jaglan, a first year geophysical technology. I'm currently a manager at ECEL.
Okay, nice to meet you. And we have Raghav.
Yeah.
Hi, Sam. Raghav, I'm currently a manager of corporate relations at ESEL,
Hi, Raghav.
and I'm in my second year right now.
Okay.
And we have Virat. Virat, just introduce yourself to Kush sir once.
Yeah, so sir, I am Raj Sharma from IIT Roorkee, BTech first year, chemical engineering.
Okay. Good to meet you, Virat. So we
Okay.
have the house full.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes. So, so firstly, I'd like to start off with a question. So we saw that you have passed out in 2009 from electrical engineering, right? So firstly, what do you think is the major difference between IIT Roorkee then and IIT Roorkee now, if you've been following the news or anything of sorts?
Yeah, I think I would say mainly the students have really been very entrepreneurial. The last 2 years, I had the privilege to go back to campus.
Okay.
I spoke to the students. We actually also recruited from the campus. We had interns joining us as well. So I had the privilege of going back to the campus, talking to the students. What I found was students were hugely entrepreneurial, right? I mean, from 2009 back then, startup wasn't a buzzword, and there was no concept of VCs or funds and startups getting so big. So I think that has changed. People are now doing volunteer work, freelancing work, and they have a feel of corporate even before their graduation. So I think that has really changed. And probably the number of initiatives the administration itself is taking. I had also met Azam from the Tides. I was one of the can say judges or in the pitching session from Tide that happened in Delhi as well. So yeah, a lot of startup kind of cultures happening. So a lot of people very enthusiastic about joining the startup world. I think that is one of the big things that has happened in the campus. Of course, the infrastructure has developed entirely. The library, I think, closed down. There's a new instead of the old library. There's something new on the campus in its place. So yeah, the campus still looks lovely. That's been the same.
Okay. And so going back to your college life, what do you think? What category would you place as? Were you one of those muggos, or were you one of those chilled out kinds, or what category do you self? And what were your campus engagements?
Okay. I was definitely not an academic fellow. Although I'm completely in a technical domain now, I definitely did not study a lot. I used to have friends which used to study the same number of hours, and I used to study, and then they were at a 9-10 GPA kind of scale, and I always used to wonder why do these guys have to study so much. But in terms of campus activities, I used to be part of the I think it was called the Himalayan Exploration Club, HEC.
Yeah,
Still
it's like this.
yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I was part of was the music section. So I used to. I just started learning guitar. That's the new thing, every new student tries to at least buy a guitar, if not learn how to play it, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I learned guitar for 4 years. Was part of the music section. I was swimming a lot. I was in the football, not the core team, but yeah, the kind of extras team. So I used to be a part of a lot of different things. I was trying to come out of the whole study circle from the preparation phase pre-IIT, and then when I got into IIT, I thought I'll enjoy a bit of campus life. But yeah, the years have been really productive. The last from 2009, from 2005 to 9, I think was really transformation.
So, do you think any of those engagements were targeted towards your entrepreneurial culture or anything that you had in mind for your venture?
I actually, before coming to the campus, had some sort of business mindset in terms of so I was a quota outcome, as like many other guys, and quota is a place where you actually go out of your home for the first time, probably post your schooling, and that's when you probably also realize there are inefficiencies in the world out there. The way people think about business and the job culture. So business means like a corporate, but business can also mean a small, husband wife having a tiffin center, or the way the messes were operated in Kota. So I started noticing these things and these inefficiencies and how small businesses are run. They're still profitable, and even big corporate giants are trying to go after profitability. And yet you see these 5 people running a mess profitably. So it's not always about having like a flip card on your hand. It could also be a small business, and that's when I started feeling okay. There is things you could do to start something up. And when I was in college, um, I had a dream. Let's say I started learning guitar, and these dreams of having my own cafe someday, or at least how does a cafe work? How does the restaurant business work? So I started going out, meeting people. Started realizing that you don't need crores and crores of money to kind of have your own cafe. I started talking to people who would lease the land in the middle of a city, and how much money do you actually need to start up a franchisee of, let's say, a Hard Rock cafe or something like that. So I started exploring those options. Never really got around to building something on my own, but I did start to realize that things are not so difficult, once you start stepping into these things on your own. Apart from that, technically I wasn't much into electronics or even my core branch electrical. I was just exploring everything out there. Never knew I would become what I am today.
Okay, so now I want to ask that do you remember an incident during your college day through which you learned something essential and you wish to caution your juniors about that?
Okay, so there were incidents. I think all college students pass through those phases. One thing you should definitely not do, right, is go to the Ganga Canal. Probably not in states in which it's not supposed to be visited. But I remember during our first year, I was told, okay, there has been some recent mishaps, and you should be very cautioned and very careful when you visit those places. We still used to go there. And there was one time an incident with a cop, and that's when I kind of realized this is probably for the best interest of my own, and not just a rule. So I would definitely say, guys, don't go to Ganga Canal very often, especially not at nights. That's one thing you should not do. Yeah.
Okay. And when did it strike to you that you should have your own venture?
Yeah. So The first, I'd say the seeds were planted when I was in Kota, and when I started thinking about what could I start up. Having ideas is never difficult. You could always think and think and think. But when you actually start making some business sense out of it, you start realizing how difficult it gets. So post college, I won't say I was a big entrepreneurial spirited fellow in college. I also started preparing for the job interviews like everyone else. Went in 2009, there was a big kind of recession crisis, and the job market was very dicey. Back then, I went to a government enterprise for almost 2 years. Post that, I went into the private sector with Bosch. And at Bosch, in around 2014, I had recently filed a patent, and I got some kind of grant money from Bosch management, and started thinking, well, if I could do something, I could do this for myself. This patent thing might actually become a venture on its own. Then I started to realize, okay, I do miss a few traits of an entrepreneur. I don't understand even the minor differences between branding or marketing or sales, and that's probably something I should know before jumping into doing something on my own. So one thing I always say, my mantra of getting into entrepreneurship is cover your downsides, risk your hedge your risks, and don't just blindly jump into something just because your idea seems brilliant. Those ideas turn to change, and um, they I think like 95% of startups would tell you the same story, that they started with an idea that pivoted 1 year from the beginning. And so I would say the real seeds were possibly in around 2014-15, just before I started thinking about getting an MBA for myself and kind of learning the business aspects of things.
And how was the entrepreneurship culture at that time? Like, if any of your friend are working on some idea?
No, none at all actually. So most of my friends and most of my batchmates, I think it's still currently the trend. People go to the US to pursue a master's, especially people from electronics, electrical, computer science, and so on and so forth. People start getting a master's degree in the US. I think that's still the culture, and that's what happened to my batch as well. I somehow was struck by a very romantic idea of staying in the country, and I was in Germany for almost a year. Worked with Bosch there. I thought I'll come back and start up something here in India, and possibly when things are ripe, I would maybe someday move out of India, but not like my first idea was to start something in India. And most of my peers at that time either were in the US or were planning to go to the US, or were in some kind of large corporate in India. That was the scene, yeah.
So, sir, I had this question that you graduated in 2009, and like even after 6 years of corporate life, what struck you to pursue an MBA in 2015?
Right. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, 6 years had passed, and I had recently finished up a patent, and that actually went into a Bosch product. I thought, okay, I'm inflating my boss's wallets. Maybe something I could do for my own self, and that was the main idea, behind why I thought I should do a business degree. Like I also said, you might hear of overnight successes, but successes don't come that easy. Even people who you would see having a successful business might have been thinking about those kind of ideas for the last like 5 years, or might have a company that actually transformed into a funded enterprise. So I was for the last 2-3 years before doing the business degree, was evaluating ideas still. And I definitely thought getting an MBA degree, especially why I chose ISB, was because it was a 1-year degree. And it's like a crash course of sorts, right? They teach you everything under the roof, and it just depends on you how much you can take in and grasp. but there's all those brilliant professors out there, all that knowledge waiting to be had. So yeah, 6 years was, I think, enough time for me to understand how the technology areas work, and what I still lack in terms of going and starting my own venture. And that's what happened. Post ISB, I actually quit the placement rounds. I sat for day zero. I got multiple selections, and I was just trying to see how's the job market in case my enterprise doesn't work, whether it's all about, again, hedging your risks. So if the startup doesn't work, whether I'll be able to go back to the job market again or not. And I soon realized, okay, I'm getting enough shortlist. This is something that will still be open probably 5 years from now. So let me just try to jump in. So day zero, I think I sat for placements. I got interviews with Microsoft, Amazon, all tech companies under the roof. And I thought, okay, good scene. So let's just start something. So I actually opted out of placements. And yeah, as soon as the ISB session was over, I started the company. I went to Saudi for my first client, basically.
Thank
So you have like a very varied work range. Means you have worked like in a lot of profiles. So do you think that kind of work experience adds up to your entrepreneurial culture and the stature that you have?
Yeah, I think so. When you're just starting up, every idea seems optimistic. You start seeing only the bright side of things. You never actually come to realize, there are corner cases that you will definitely not think of, even if you plan like years in advance. And I think being in a corporate teaches you that how things can go wrong, and especially what goes into building products. I was fortunate enough to have kind of a corporate startup experience back in 2012. I think it was. There was a small corporate corporate kind of startup stint that I did with Bosch Connected Devices and Solutions. It was a very small kind of company. Almost, I think the three people who started this company, two were in India, including me, and our product owner from Germany. And having grown that company to almost like 80 people by the time I left Bosch, I started realizing, okay, this is I'm getting the hang of it. And once you see that path, you have a good idea of whether you can or cannot do it on your own. So I think I was lucky that way to have to be able to learn all this early in my career. But for people who are just on their 9 to 5 routine, they have to really dig deep and try to find those extra skills that they need to kind of learn offline, or to at least talk to so many entrepreneurs and learn from their failures, especially. So I think that's important. And what a corporate life tells you is nothing's going to be simple. You're always going to have bosses. You're always going to have projects that will fail. And if you're not in those difficult shoes, you'll only see the bright side of everything. So I think that's an important lesson that you should have.
So do you think a fresher always has this disadvantage of versus a person who has relatively more work experience in the startup world? Or do you think he can manage itself?
It's all about the kind of the prelogue of that story, right? It's all about even if you are a fresher entering into the startup world, did you do something while you were in college that can expose you to these circumstances that you generally get when you actually enter the job market? So I've been following the IIT Roorkee entrepreneurship culture as well. I've had students who have been talking to guys like Log9. Recently, I think there was FamPay. And I know a lot about these people. These guys have been doing volunteer work. These guys have been doing some freelance work. And this freelance work actually gives them that experience, how to negotiate, how to bargain their rates with an end customer, and what does it mean to deliver your project on time. And without those lessons, it's going to be really, really, your first time you're doing everything. And when you do that, you're bound to fail a couple of times. At least statistically, you'll not be 100% right all the time. and how do you learn how to be right most of the time? It's one of those 14 principles that Amazon proposes. Be right mostly, most of the times, be right or try to be right. And how do you be right mostly? When you have actually been there, done that kind of thing, right? So I think it's incredibly important what you do before you end up doing your own startup. And for people who have had that experience while they were in the college, can be in a better position as a fresher when they enter the startup world.
Harsh, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as a CTO of SenRa, what kind of trait and skills you expect in a prospective college student to join you as a team?
Right. I think for any company that comes to the campus for interviews, 90% of the structure of all resumes look the same, right? And you'd agree. In your college life, there's stuff that you can do, but there's limits to what you can achieve, right? So I'd say like 90% of your resumes would match each other. So a person who is actually coming for that interview has to really see those spikes in the interview, as they call them in the MBA world. You have to see, okay, how are you building a story, right? Have you done some projects? Have you done some internships that explain why you went on a certain path? I think that's incredibly important. Another thing that I look forward to is kind of a discipline. Um, when somebody has, for the last at least 2-3 years in their college, focused on one thing and really, made it somewhere, took that skill somewhere, or participated in some event that actually they were preparing for. So I look for that focus and discipline in somebody when they're applying for a job. Otherwise, like I said, your resumes look the same. Your projects would be plus minus 20% of one another. And especially when you're talking to the same set of people, like from electrical engineering or from computer science or from mechanical or from civil engineering, the resumes don't differ much. So people have to look at the soft traits. People have to look at why do you want to join the company? Would you be able to speak out even though you're a fresher? If you think something's right, would you be able to speak out? Would you be able to kind of focus on the core job at hand? So your ethics matter, right? So those are the things I'm more passionate about, and not really. I mean, of course, you get a set of people who have already cleared the kind of aptitude rounds or the mathematics round. So actually, that becomes the distinguishing criteria.
Yeah. So a prevalent narrative surrounding entrepreneurship is that it allow you to starting your own something and be your own boss, and hence escape the drag of a job from 9 to 5. So how prudent do you think it is to decide to create a startup with that mindset?
I think it's absolutely stupid to think about you're not going to be working in a 9 to 5 job. You're probably going to be going to work from a 9 to 12 kind of a job when you do your own startup. It's going to be absolutely horrible, and it's not something I'm just saying because it's actually the story for everyone who starts up. You'll soon realize with a 9 to 5 job, at least you were able to cut it out at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. With entrepreneurship, you'll never get that out of your head. You'll always keep improving on what you have. You'll always keep slugging out. And yeah, so that mindset of entering a startup is not going to be applicable once you start having people around you. When you're just starting off, maybe it works for you, but when you have you're like the grand old dad of your company. You have the responsibility of at least like 20 people that have been recruited in your startup, and you're kind of the parent in that organization. So you have to actually take care of those people. And if you think of it as a no boss job, I'll just do when I feel like I want to work, I'll work. That kind of attitude will kind of, it's kind of a sink or sail decision if you want to enter into a startup world. It's definitely not a mindset you should have when you want to enter. But one thing you should just look at, like I said earlier, with all that hard work, you're not going to be, filling somebody else's wallet. It's going to be your own. So that should be a big motivation towards, not just thinking of it as a 9 to 5 thing.
I just wanted to ask a question. Does it ever happen now that you get struck by monotony?
Monotony? No, absolutely not. I've been, yeah, like I said, like I've been fortunate to have a corporate startup stint now with my own thing, and looking at it from the top, to hire the HR, to work on the marketing, to work on sales as well. So, the designations are misleading. When you're sitting at the top of a startup, you'll have to work out everything from office furniture to the electricians to the how the employees feel and how to keep them motivated, to your marketing efforts, to your sales efforts. Everything goes hand in hand, and it's never monotonous. I think monotonous is the last word I would use for my job right now.
But did it used to happen before when you didn't have your own startup? Like you were working in a job for someone?
Absolutely. I mean, you'd see, like in behavioral habits, when people have the corporate job, they'll look for that spike outside the job. They'll do their own trips. They'll keep planning for days and days. I think that's an intent to remove monotony from their genes. And with a startup, your startup becomes your life. So that's kind of the difference between having a corporate monotonous job versus coming into a startup. You'll not be planning your vacations anymore. When you trust me, when you doing your own startup, you'll not be planning your vacations in advance. It will happen when you need a break. You'll have to just run out of house and find a vacation on your own. So there is monotony in corporate life, which will not be in a startup for sure.
So Kush, I had this question that you're both the CTO and COO of SenRa. So what skills you think you're necessary to do justice to both of these posts?
Yeah, so that's a interesting question. I started out as a CTO. Recently, had to take over the operations responsibilities as well. The thing that has become most important now for me is to manage my energy, instead of earlier managing my time. And what I mean by managing my energy is, as a human being, you're going to have limitations of how much you can absorb and how much you can deliver. And what's required from you at that title is a lot of foresight into the future and a lot of technical operational inputs. So you're going to have to manage your brain space a lot. That would mean you're going to have to take breaks when necessary. You'll have to cut things out. You'll have to delegate a lot. So I think, like, the key words for me in those titles would be kind of so time management, of course, but then energy management, and then delegating as much as possible. So having like the right core team to take that pressure off of you. If that's missing, I think it's again a break scenario, because you're not going to be able to look at every little minor detail. And uh, another important thing you should think about probably is setting up small repeatable processes. That's probably the most undervalued um thing that founders miss. Processes, not in conventional terms of a corporate life, but small repeatable chunks of processes, not elongated kind of time consuming data filling processes, but processes are going to help you be repeatable in your outcomes. And if you realize that early, you're going to set up these small repeatable things for everyone. You're going to have strict instructions of a protocol that you can always follow when a problem comes, or a protocol that you can always follow when an inventory comes in, or when you have to deploy a network somewhere, or when you have to talk to a customer in a certain way. So train, set up small repeatable processes, and have the right core team that can actually take off the load from you.
Uh, okay, thank you. And also, like, you've been into like corporate life for quite some time before, venturing into the startup world. So, what do you think is the main difference between the startup world and the corporate world?
um, yeah, so the corporate world, um, I have huge respect for these companies that have built themselves to these multi-billion dollar or multi-million dollar scales. Right, these guys absolutely have some of the people who have worked or dedicated their entire lives to kind of reach where they are at now. But to be that guy, it's incredibly tough, and you realize that once your deliverables never stop, right? Once you're part of this corporate, you have a deliverable, you know your exact timelines. Things are much more streamlined, organized for you. There is a boss that will tell you what to do, how to do, and when to do it. With startups, it's kind of the other way around. You'll have to take those calls on your own, and if you're not smart about that, you might lose the project, and that's going to have a major revenue impact. It might kind of also fail your co-founder. So your responsibility as a co-founder or as a founder to take care of your employees forces you to go that extra mile. And that's probably the difference. It's not just your in your corporate, like it's called your increment cycles that you care about. It's not just that April to Feb to April period when everyone starts working hard and starts showing results to get there in the next April with a fat increment or with your full bonus. It becomes much more than that. It becomes more about the people that you're with and about having this romanticized idea of your startup making it big, right? So things change really in a big way.
Why did you choose Delhi to be the home of your startup? And you could have chosen Bombay, Bangalore. They're like the tech hubs and the corporate hubs. Why New Delhi precisely?
It's close to my home, but no, just kidding. But one of the reasons was it's close to your home is also because we do a lot of government licensing. And it's important for us to be able to attend, for example, the BIS meetings, to be able to go to the Department of Telecom, or to be able to talk to the Telecom Engineering Center and those kind of places. So we have to be based because we are in an industry which is probably the first time in India we are seeing a LoRaWAN infrastructure being deployed anywhere in India. And because it's such a new and it plays with the smart cities lines. So because it's such a new thing, a lot of policies have to be enabled to ease up your business. And for that reason, majorly we started thinking about Delhi. Of course, when I said, family is important, it's actually true. It might sound like a joke, but once you start getting your hard work in place, you need to have your family at the periphery somewhere, because you have to balance things out. It's not easy to be immersed for 5 complete years in your job, and kind of lose sight of your loved ones during that phase. So I think it makes sense for me.
First 2 years of startup as being, and what are the experiences that you have learned from?
Abrat, your voice broke out in the between. Can you repeat again?
Okay, so I want to ask that how are your starting 2 years of startup journey, and what are the experiences that you have learned from it?
The first 2 years? Yeah, so first 2 years were mostly educating the customers and mostly talking to the policymakers to be able to carve a niche in the industry, to be able to get LoRaWAN and get our technology out there to people, trying to explain to different stakeholders. So not only investors, right, talking to government enterprises, to B2B clients, or to smart city officials, to consultants, that while LoRaWAN could change the game. And getting from the beginning of our startup to this phase, we now see LoRaWAN is now included in all the government tenders for smart metering of any sort. And this was not easy, to get LoRaWAN included in the tender specs, you need to really be out there talking to people. Apart from that, the first and foremost thing we had to do and we had to learn was to set up the team itself. I was saying earlier about having the right core team. I think that's probably the most important thing you need to focus on and learn about. So hiring those first few guys is of extreme importance. And I was fortunate I have a good team now, and they do their job, I do mine, and things are streamlined, smoothened out. But the first 2 years were absolutely turbulent. You have to set up so many things and think of so many different angles that it gets very troublesome.
So now at this stage, what are the most difficult things? I mean, once the initial period has passed, now what are the most difficult things that you're supposed to cope up with in your startup journey?
These days, it's mostly about scaling up. So I think we are past those initial phases. We recently signed some big contracts, and they'll keep us going. And at this stage right now, we are thinking about how to take it to the next stage, how to have not only the core part of our business, which was the network deployment, but also have ancillary products to kind of expand the portfolio. So we recently also went into software domain as an application platform. We recently also started thinking about e-marketplaces and those kind of things. So that happens with all startups. You kind of you have your cash cows, you have your core set of business that brings you the first tranche of money, and then you start expanding from there. So right now we're at that stage. The tenders have been coming out smoothly, mentioning LoRaWAN as one of the optional technologies. So yeah, we're now in that comfortable situation where we don't now have to go out and talk to all the city officials about what LoRaWAN could do for them. And yeah, so now those are the challenges, basically how to scale up.
Right.
So I wanted to ask that what is the message that you would like to give to young entrepreneurs that are thriving in the college and in the world now?
To the young entrepreneurs, I mean, there's a lot of different motivational things, out there about how you should lead your college life to have a successful startup. I'll not go into those details, but I'll definitely talk about one thing which probably people miss out on is the amount of fun you should have while you are having your own startup. I think it's not possible to sustain doing a hard work on something that you're not excited about. And people, I think, miss that in the bigger picture. They start thinking of ideas. And I'll give you an example. If I had spoken to one of the college, very young college grad who had been thinking about a rental business of being kind of a broker between a renting party and a tenant. What happened is he kind of lost interest in that market entirely, and started generating interest in arts and those kind of things. And I was just talking to him, and I thought, why did you even think of such ideas and started on this journey without thinking it through? So I think that's really important. People miss out on what could be highly scalable versus what will generate their interest. You can't make something scalable without enjoying the journey to reach that scale. And I think, like, I would just want to convey to maybe students that have fun in what you're doing, or choose only something that you're having fun or that you'll enjoy working on. Don't assume your hard work will come naturally to you just because you have an idea that is just out there. You have to really look at your interest areas and feel really passionate about something before you start.
And so, given the current scenario, what do you think? How will you say the people are supposed to cope? I mean, there's a lot of panic amongst the students, especially in the final year, right? In the pre-final year, right? Because of all the job scenarios that's going to be doomed. So, what are your comments on that?
Yeah, I think things are going to get better. It's not that this is a permanent situation. There will be definite repercussions on the industry. People have been talking about it. There have been talks of layoff. You won't see much layoff in the technical industry, just because so there's a lot of different kind of technologies, and you have to really look at the right industry you want to get into. There's the whole semiconductor business that's related to what I do. There's the whole software and tech industry, which might not get so adversely affected. But even the giants like Google are talking about stopping their hiring sprees, and or even kind of to go as far as laying off employees. I think things would get better, especially if you are in your startup this year. You have sufficient 1 year to kind of not in your college this year. You have a sufficient 1 year to until you actually hit your job market, and I think things would definitely improve by then. We as startups had to kind of pivot our business strategy a bit because it's lockdown and we can't go about deploying networks anymore for sure. So we recently kind of switched into a more software driven approach, and kind of selling software became a priority within our sales. And I think those kind of switches are going to make or break the case. A startup or even a student personally has to find out what skills to invest into. That skill should be valued next year or next to next year, and the market should accept those kind of skill sets. So I think that's a point of decision which is important right now for students.
And so one more question I'd like to ask, were you always the kind of person who's always had like 5 years down the line chalked down what is your vision 5 years down the line, or did you just went with the flow? And what do you suggest?
I never had, and anybody who says he has the 5 years planned out is lying. Nobody has the 5 years under their control, and nobody can plan the next 5 years, right? You can always plan the next year and the year after that, as much as that can mean, and just try to salvage the situation based on that. I'd say one thing definitely though, before you start up, have a plan accordingly, and invest a few kind of at least a few years on that idea. I'd not say get an idea, start up tomorrow. That's probably not my strategy, at least. And what I would say is think about an idea, start building something, and start looking at competition or something, and then kind of get to the market. Definitely, I'm not the 5 year kind of approach guy.
Okay, thank you.
Sir, I had this question that many times those who want to start up, they have this question like how our co-founder should be and how should we choose our co-founder. So what would you like to say on that? Like how did you choose your co-founder, or how did you come across him? And
Well, the first company I started right out of ISB was with an IT Roorkee batchmate of mine, and this guy was institute rank 1 or something, or 2, I think. Is like a really really smart fellow, Harvard postdoc and like a PhD material science. So I was fortunate to choose the right fellow. Then I stumbled upon from my work life. I found the people who I wanted as part of my core team, and those have been really the guys who are trustworthy. But I think even before I start going out there trying to find co-founders, important thing is the trust factor. For sure, you need to be able to trust your co-founder. Then of course comes the complementary skill question. Your co-founder should not have the exact same skill as you. I don't think having 2 MBAs in the co-founding team is a good idea. Even if you have a business that it's kind of a consulting startup, okay, that's fine. But at least have some sort of complementary skill set to be able to choose the right co-founder. Then you of course need your technical guys. You of course need your kind of marketing guys. So you build the team as you progress. But always try to find that complementary skill set. Always find the guy who is a good friend first, maybe, who you can trust in crisis situations, and who will not probably leave your side if there's tough times, because there is going to be tough times for sure.
My question is that you have recently announced about Ginger 2.0 during the lockdown period. I want to know that actually what is the idea behind Ginger 2.0 and what is all about, and how are you going to cope up with your work during this tough time? As this is a very new idea which you have announced nowadays, so how will you cope up with that?
Sure. So this actually, the idea came from our customers' feedbacks. the customers in India, what we found was when we are talking about IoT, people start talking about, okay, that's all fine. You have your sensors, you have your networks, all that's good. How do I see my ROI? And how do I see my value? What are the exact KPIs that I can generate from these sensors? Nobody wants to really talk about technology until there's an outcome to the technology, right? So the idea actually came from our customers, and the customers started talking about customizations every time. So when we were working on the Ginger version 1, um, started feeling that our customers, and especially the Indian conglomerates, they're always talking about customize this, customize that, and then I need this particular add-on to the platform, or I need this extra feature. Otherwise, I don't want to buy the whole platform. And nobody is happy with the 80/20 rule. Nobody wants to just say, okay, it fulfills 80% of my requirements, I'm going to buy the product. That's never the case. They want the best bang for the buck. And what we thought is, okay, let's do one thing. Let's kind of make it self customizable. So let's have an IoT platform which you can just take up on your own, modify on your own, create your own KPIs, add your own kind of devices, add your own type of network. It doesn't even need to be a SenRa network, could be in any third party network. And generate your own ROI calculations, have a small calculator screen, have small graphs that you can generate on your own. So we started working on this idea, and the complete last year we were actually working on this. Good for us that, when the COVID lockdown came, because it's a software product, we can of course work from home on software. It doesn't require actually a hardware presence. And we could build upon the knowledge that we had already worked on in the last 1 year. So when the lockdown actually came, we were still working very hard on the product, and we were still working on that release that was pending on this month end. And that release happened, and we're glad actually with the pivot, because we, I think, just 4 days into announcing the launch of Ginger, we had over 100 businesses who had registered their account on the platform, which is kind of unseen. So I'd say, like, people now have the time sitting at home to evaluate IoT softwares more than the IoT hardware. They don't have the IoT hardware with them. But the software, of course, you can just log in. And the strategy we adopted to sell Ginger was to have a free account, right? That sells. So we gave in a free network portal access for up to 1 user and 5 devices. We also gave a free Ginger access for people to actually just sign up and start using the platform up to 5 devices. And then, yeah, we're seeing good growth that way.
Okay, I think does anybody have any other questions? I think sir, this was all from our side, and
Okay, sure.
it was truly a great learning experience. I mean, I'm sure all of us agree it was great talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely, my pleasure. And actually, I see you guys. You're doing a great job. You're merging different platforms. You're actually using the time you have right now to do something about educating your fellow students. I think it's a very novel cause. Talk to as many entrepreneurs as you can, and take that message from the entrepreneurs to the students and bridge that gap. I think that's going to be of prime importance. I'll try to actually come down to the campus also sometime if I can, and as soon as I can find the means to get to the campus. And yeah, I love to keep engaged with the campus.
That'll be great, sir. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Yashvi. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
sir.
sir.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day, sir.
Bye-bye.
So good.